Imagine a world where India is a far-off land. Nobody you know has been there. Spices from there are worth a fortune. This was the reality until Vasco da Gama's journey to India. Vasco da Gama's journey to India was the first of its kind. It brought the world closer together than ever before. Before Vasco da Gama discovered a route to India, Europe and Asia were two unconnected continents. It was the discovery of this route that began a connection between Europe and Asia. This connection was far more efficient than conventional land routes, and ships were also able to carry far more supplies than land caravans. Unfortunately, the discovery of the route had the probably intended consequence of fast-tracking the colonization of Asia. Come with me as we explore Vasco da Gama's infinitely interesting voyage to India. In 1460, a boy named Vasco da Gama was born in the town of Sines. Sines is a small town in the southern part of Portugal that borders the Atlantic Ocean. His father, Estevão, was the commander of the fortress there. Since the Gama family was nobility, Vasco was also a noble. Vasco grew up in Sines and when he became old enough, joined the Portuguese Navy. In the Navy, he gained a reputation as a successful navigator and reliable officer. In 1492, coincidentally the year that Christopher Columbus set off for India, Vasco had great success seizing French ships for disrupting Portuguese routes. Since Vasco was very successful seizing ships, it served to build up his reputation tremendously. At the time, Portugal was one of the world's strongest naval powers. As such, it was a huge honor when Vasco was chosen to lead an expedition to India. The expedition set out on July 8, 1497 with 4 ships and a crew of 170. They went south into the Atlantic and landed in Cape Verde, a recently established Portuguese colony. Cape Verde is an island 500 miles off the African coast. It was frequently used as a resupply stop for ships. So that's what Vasco's expedition did. They restocked and rested there for a couple of weeks. After fully restocking, they set off again, largely staying west of the African continent. Later on, they stopped at the Cape of Good Hope in November of 1497. It was an important stop for routes going to Africa, and after Vasco's discovery of the route to India, Vasco and his crew continued from there, rounding the bottom of the continent. From there, they continued up the eastern coast of Africa. The first stop along the eastern coast was the island of Mozambique. The island of Mozambique was a major trading post for Muslim traders. Vasco and his crew stopped there in March of 1498, possibly with intentions to resupply. However, the Sultan of the island was offended by the gifts that they gave him, and as a result, they were kicked off the island. Vasco still marked the island as a potential jumping-off point for Portuguese trade in the region, and marked the island for Portugal to colonize later on. Continuing along the eastern coast, the next stop was Malindi, a town on the Kenya coast. Vasco's fleet landed there on April 14, 1498, and the Sultan there was much friendlier to them. As such, they were given resources and found a navigator to help them reach India from there. After that, it took a 23-day journey across the Indian Ocean to reach India and land on May 20th. When they landed in Calicut, another important Arab trading post, the reception there was lukewarm due to Vasco's fleet's ignorance of the customs of the land, especially their belief that the locals were Christian when they were Hindu. This led to friction between Vasco's crew and the locals. Additionally, the Muslim traders of the area did not like Vasco and his crew because they were in danger of losing their monopoly on trade from India to Europe. Due to this, when they left, Vasco and his crew were unable to acquire a trade treaty. The crew also did not learn much about the weather patterns of the area and ended up leaving right as a massive monsoon swept through the area. On their way back to Malindi, the same trip that took 23 days became a 3-month trip. They landed in Malindi on January 8, 1499. Due to the long trip, many of the crew members died of scurvy, prompting Vasco to burn one of the ships. They landed in Mozambique on February 1st and continued around the Cape in modern-day South Africa and continued up the western coast of Africa. Some of the ships got separated, but eventually all the remaining ships landed in Portugal around the latter stages of 1499. Only 55 of the original 170 crew members survived the more than 38,000-kilometer journey. After the expedition, Vasco da Gama became a national hero. The expedition was considered a massive success. To capitalize on the discovery of the route, another fleet was immediately sent to India. It was led by Pedro Alvarez Cabral. On that expedition, Cabral and his men worked hard to get Portugal a foothold in the trade of the region. Additionally, on that expedition, Cabral got into some battles and primarily killed people on Muslim cargo vessels. This began a long history of colonizing Asia. In 1502, Vasco was chosen to head another expedition to India. This one was far larger and had 20 ships. 10 ships were directly under Vasco da Gama, and another 10 under Vasco's direct relatives. The point of this expedition was to continue to strengthen Portugal's footholds in the region. Unfortunately, the way they accomplished this goal was to attack ports of the region, especially Muslim ports, and at one point burning a ship on its way back from Mecca, killing many people, including children. They went to Calicut, the original place where Vasco landed in India. The crew there wreaked havoc on the port, killing 38 hostages. Then they continued to Cochin, where they were able to secure an alliance. They eventually returned to Portugal in 1503. After returning to Portugal, Vasco da Gama essentially retired and gave some advice to the King of Portugal in relation to affairs with Portugal. He was eventually sent to India in 1524 by King John of Portugal to become Viceroy of India. He died in the same year in Cochin. Vasco da Gama's first expedition is his most famous and his most influential. The 38,000-kilometer journey was a feat of navigation and deserves many plaudits. But the discovery of the route enabled colonization to an area that was previously completely impossible. Additionally, his second voyage and his attacks on trade posts were very brutal and show the violent nature of colonialism and colonization. It also allowed the Portuguese to get very rich from trade and was a big step towards globalization and an interconnected world. Navigators like him started the connection of the world that we enjoy today, but they also led to incredible atrocities and subjugation as the result of colonization. Thank you for watching our video, and comment if you have any ideas for future videos.